Hi guys, in this video I explain how to create a sequence diagram in PlantUML. The example that I'll be using is a client-server application that has a UI where the user can add or remove items from a shopping cart. In this particular sequence diagram, I focus on the flow where a user adds an item to the shopping cart. On the left, you see the PlantUML commands, and on the right is a sequence diagram that's generated from these commands. Let's take a look at the first command in line 4. Here I create an actor in the sequence diagram. You can see the actor over here. The actor is essentially the user of your application. I name this actor customer, but you could name it anything that fits to your application. It could be employee, or it could be just user as well. Then I define an alias by typing in as user. This allows me to refer back to the customer in my PlantUML commands at the bottom here. You can see I typed in user. I no longer have to spell out customer each time I refer back to the customer. Aliases are useful when you have longer names and you want to have shorter names in your commands. Next, I define the participants in the sequence diagram. A participant is essentially a class in your program that's involved in the particular use case that you're covering in the sequence diagram. There are also specialized participants. For example, if your flow involves a database, you can type in the keyword database, give it an identifier, and then it will show with a database icon in the diagram. There is also queue. If your flow involves a queue, you can see it's rendered as a queue. And there are more. You can search other ones on the PlantUML website. In my case, I only need 4 standard participants: shop view, client, server, and shopping cart. Let's take a look at the commands. The first command is the interaction between the user and the UI, shop view. Most of the time, these arrows is the flow from one class to another, and it represents a function call. Now, between the user and the UI, it's a little bit different because the user interacts with the UI with a keyboard or with a mouse or through a microphone. So these ones are not really method calls. The very first command here goes from the user to the shop view, and the user selects an item. You can see this drawn out by this arrow up here. Now imagine the shop view has a drop-down list. The user selects an item and he wants to add that item to the shopping cart. The next line then has the user interacting on the shop view by clicking the Add Item button. This is the second solid arrow over here. Now this button has an event handler registered to it. And this event handler is a method inside the client. The client essentially is the controller for the view. In the next line, this event handler gets triggered. There is a function call from shop view to client on the method on add item clicked. This is the one here. This essentially means that the click on the button triggers the on add item click method. This method then calls the get select item on the shop view. Here I have this from client to shop view, get selected item. And then the dashed arrow means it's a return from the function call. So here the client calls get selected item on the shop view object. This executes to get the selected item, and then it returns the item back to the client. This is outlined by the dash line, and this you can do with 2 dashes instead of 1. So 1 dash is a solid line, and 2 dashes always means a return from a function call. Now, what you may have noticed by now is sequence diagrams you read from top to bottom. Each of these arrows are steps. And if we want to number these steps, we can type in at the top auto number. Now you can see the steps are numbered with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This makes it easier to refer back to it when communicating on the same diagram. Now let's see what's going on in the next commands. The next command is a call from the client to the server and invokes the add item function on the server. This is drawn out at step 6 here. Now the server interacts with the shopping cart. It calls the add method on the shopping cart and passing the item in as argument. The shopping cart then adds the item to the shopping cart. There may be a limit. So it returns if this operation was successful. This is outlined in step 8 here with a dashed line. Remember, a dashed line is a return. And then I add a condition. You can see I use the else keyword followed by a condition. For the condition itself, you can just use Java syntax. There are no specific rules. Technically, I could also just leave it success if I treat it as a Boolean, but to make it explicit, I say when success is true, then I want to execute these commands. Else, I execute these commands. Now you can see this is rendered out here as an alternative. So here it has the condition. If success is true, the line block up here gets executed above this long dashed line. If this condition is false, the commands below that dashed line get executed. If this condition is true, the call on step 6 returns true, and then the client calls the show status function on the shop view to show that the item was added. Now, if success is not true, the server returns false to the client, and the client will call the show status with not added on the shop view. Sometimes you need more than one if. In that case, you can just write another condition up here, and then you can see this condition gets added over here, and you could add another else block. This is how you define conditions in your sequence diagrams. Note that these conditions here really just decide on what flow to take next. Essentially, here you can see, should it return true or false? And based on that, there are different function calls following that. So it's really the high-level conditions that decide on which flow to take. Sometimes you also want to perform a method called repeatedly. You can do this with the loop keyword. So loop, you write down some condition or some explanation how long this loop executes, and then you use the end keyword. Now you can see this gets shown on the diagram using the loop keyword instead of the else keyword. And finally, you can also use stereotypes. For example, for shop view, if I want to make it explicit that shop view is an FX window, I can use the stereotype FX window. And here this makes it just more explicit that this is a Java FX window where the user interacts with. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.